Okay, so moving on. By the way, for you folks at home, it's now 3 o'clock in the morning. Okay, we've been
Berlin
doing.
Alexander plots of interviews.
I'm sorry. Yeah, did
The
you say
Berlin, it's the
Oh,
Berlin Alexander plots of
oh,
interviews.
okay. I thought you were saying Fanny and Alexander, which was a 4-hour movie.
Another great
Some,
example.
yeah, some produced. Anyway, okay. So onwards and upwards. I have no idea how I got this show. There was a show in production. Oh, of course, I got it through All American. All American TV, which no longer exists, was run by a guy named Sid Vintage. I knew Sid through Perfect Score. He had hired me to produce run-throughs on To Tell the Truth and Beat the Clock and Match Game, none of which I sold. Nice job, David. Because Sid had his own take on those shows. And so instead of doing traditional straight ahead match game, he had them, there was a red team and a blue team. It was very confusing. Anyway, he liked me because I did what he asked me to do. Anyway, I got a call from All American, who had a lot of money because at the time they were doing a little show, or they thought it was a little show, called Baywatch. Turned out to be an enormous hit. And so All American went from a very tiny company to a huge all-encompassing company. I'll tell you one last thing just about Sid with To Tell the Truth. Goodson Todman had moved down to Wilshire Boulevard here in Los Angeles, and they had folded up the company, and All American now owned all their product, all their shows. And Sid asked me to go to Goodson Todman and go into their library and take out any books. And I went over there, and I've never told this story, and it's probably not interesting to anybody but me, but you know, Goodson Todman have been around since 1949, 1950. I mean, What's My Line, you know, started, I think that's good. I mean, Match Game, To Tell the Truth, all those shows, you know, if it was a good show, it was a good quiz show, panel show, it was a Goodson Todman show. And I went into that library, actually through the offices, I took some stationery, you know, it was like it had just been abandoned. And there were just so many amazing books. I walked out of there with boxes of books from the 1910, just an amazing assortment of material that you would never see in any other library. And I brought it back to All American, they were not interested in anything at all. I don't know what they were expecting, but it was just such a pleasure, having never worked for Goodson Todman, to be allowed into their deepest vault of, you know, where they got their ideas and where they got, you know, all their information from these fabulous books. It was kind of like walking back in time. It was truly a treat. Anyway, back to the present tense, almost. Okay, so Zooventure, All American had launched. They sold it to a station called it was Animal Planet, and Zooventure, and it was hosted by J.D. Roth, same guy who hosted Funhouse for Stone Stanley. And again, wonderful producer, and talented, and good guy. And again, can't say enough about JD. If you want a show done where you don't have to do any work and let the host just go, hire JD Roth. Although I don't think he wants to host anymore. He's made a lot of money, and he's very successful, and he deserves it all. So Zooventure was had hired a few producers I won't name, who just were not delivering the kind of stunts that they wanted. Animal Planet had bought Zooventure as a show that took place at the San Diego Zoo. So shot on location down there, meaning I'm in LA right now. And they had, it was already set up, you know, for penguins and such. They had an audience and sort of a proscenium arch stage. And the basic elements of the show were simply that kids competed in stunts, and in between the stunts, zookeepers would come out with animals, generally animals that people had not seen before. It wasn't a matter of bringing out a chimpanzee. It would be, a type of lemur perhaps that no one had seen. There was one animal, it's called a lesser panda. Has nothing to do with panda bears. A lesser panda, amazing looking animal. I mean, luckily, when I did get to work on the show, I knew the San Diego Zoo upside down. I spent so much time with the zookeepers themselves. Plus, they were so thrilled to have us there, as if we were royalty or something. They were constantly taking us out into the back of the San Diego Zoo, where giraffes and rhinos and everything was running free. It was not part of a tour at that point. Back in New Jersey, we had something called Lion Country Safari, where you would drive through an area and there'd be lions and such in the middle of New Jersey. That died quickly, thankfully, because it was not very nice to the animals, which, the climate of New Jersey is not where lions normally grow. Anyway, so kids would compete in stunts and the animals would come on, and somehow, just like with legends, you would tie in with a very thin thread. And again, Todd Nelson was brilliant at this, tying in the animal to the stunt that we would do. Okay, and JD would announce. We prototyped, I'm sorry, I'm jumping the gun. I mentioned the fact that the producers that Sid had initially hired had never done a stunt show before. I had worked with them years before on a Merrill Heater show, and they were terrific. But I guess they kind of knew they were out of their element. And then I was hired. I don't know if they called me an advisor or whatever they call me, but ultimately I wound up producing the show. They were still on board, but weren't hands-on. I was the hands-on producer. But again, like Family Challenge, they didn't have a prototype area. So we found a park nearby, just a regular park. We decided, okay, as long as the cops don't get us, we'll prototype out here, as opposed to San Diego Zoo and make a big mess. So we would prototype in the park. This is prior to going down to the zoo and shooting the shows. So we prototype in the park. John Kierhofer had a truck. If we got kicked out of one park, we'd go to another park and we'd prototype. And Johnny, again, would build everything. And I'm so happy for John, that, again, Survivor, 12 years, he's been producing that show. I mean, multimillionaire. And I knew him when, he could barely afford an apartment. Again, cream does rise to the top. The great producers, creators really do well. Stephen Brown being another, but I won't name everybody. The stunts went very well. Again, they allowed me to produce. JD and I always got along. We knew each other a long time. Todd's there, John's there. No muss, no fuss. It went very, very smoothly. We always, we were shooting outside. So, we had to wrap up before the sun went down, which we did. And then that was fun time because the zoo would close and we'd still be cleaning up because we'd have to clean up before the next day, because if you'd have whatever kind of mess that we would make, and it wasn't human hot dogs, so we'd clean, JD would leave, and it was basically John, Todd, and I had a key to the San Diego Zoo, believe it or not. Okay, I was the last one in the zoo. And we would hang out, John, Todd, and I, not every night, but, we were in a hotel about 2 miles, for the few months that we were down there, we had to live in a hotel. That was a nice part of my life, was that, I got to visit a lot of different cities and live in different cities while I'm producing shows there, not knowing, what the hell's around me, but a studio is a studio. Even the zoo itself was pretty easy to facilitate stunts in the smallish area that we had. And we always had an audience because there's always people at the zoo. And, JD might not have been the biggest star, but people did know who he was. And, again, they wanted to certainly watch a TV show. And, JD is so ingratiating that even if you hadn't seen him before, I think if you watched him once, you would watch him again. He just has that kind of affable personality. So that show went well. And again, we locked up the zoo at night and had fun. And we'd go back to our hotel and have some more fun. And it was a great time. I mean, the best thing I can say about that show was that it didn't feel like we were working. It really, at Stone Stanley, we still had to run stuff by Scott and David. As nice as they are, we still had to run stuff by them. But with Zooventure, because the producers were kind of, their hands were tied, and they were kind of disinterested at that point, maybe a little unhappy that I came in, maybe not, I don't know. It was fun, it was easy. And again, every stunt that we came up with that we liked, we put on the air. And there was nobody to run it by. And Animal Planet, who likewise had never done a stunt show, they came in, I forget where they were located, somewhere on the East Coast, but not New York. And the head of Animal Planet, I forget his name. I remember the second woman in charge, Margot Ken Green. They just loved the show. For whatever reason, I was charismatic then, unlike these last 11 hours. And we had a lot of dinners together, and they were all excited, and they were going to pick up the show for next season, et cetera, et cetera. And we wrapped, and again, it went very well. And if you have any questions about the show, leave them in the comments below, and I'll let this
Forward them to me, I'll forward them to you, and you'll get an answer in 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah, that's fine. But it was just fun. And, I won't go into the individual stunts because, again, this will be a 19-hour interview. Any questions you have, leave them in the comments, okay? Because, again, this is all ancient history.